Good evening. I would like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Elmhurst Zoning and Planning Commission. Still following guidelines set out by the Governor of the State of Illinois for virtual meetings. First thing I need to do is to check if everyone can hear me. So I will go through this. Mike Kopp in the public comment room, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. City staff, Emily Egan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Commissioner Callaway, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Chair Rose.
Court reporter Kiki Andriopoulos, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Hoffman, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Commissioner Pittman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Commissioner Snyder, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Commissioner Burns, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Commissioner Uditsky, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and I will ask everyone who is on the call, if you can hear me, you can just all, do I need to say each one of their names? I'm going to say each one of your names. This is your moment of YouTube fame. So, Jamie Putnam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. Neil Driscoll, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Brian Vinosky, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Eric Tracy, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Don't know a name here. Galaxy S205G, can you hear me?
Yes, Robert Sloan here. Thank you.
Okay, great. Jay Farnham, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
John Balloon from Valmatic, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Kevin Mahoney, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Someone by the name of Pinot, can you hear me?
I can hear you, thank you.
Okay. Robert Sloan, can you hear me? Robert Sloan, you're muted.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. Tim Sjogren, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Tony Cincinnelli, can you hear me? I don't.
I can hear you, thank you.
Okay, great. Werner Brisky, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and someone at a phone number 1630 ending in 393, can you hear me? Okay, I can't establish that that person can hear me or not. So I'll ask to unmute. They can't hear me. Okay. Again, because we are conducting these meetings virtually still, I need to ask Eileen Franz to please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Here.
Commissioner Callaway.
Here.
Commissioner Garland is absent. Commissioner Hoffman.
Here.
Commissioner McCoy is absent. Commissioner Pittman.
Here.
Commissioner Snyder.
Here.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Here.
Chair Rose.
Here. We have a quorum. Eileen, I'm going to ask you to mute your, okay. We have a quorum. Thank you. We've reached the point in our meeting where we will now ask for public comment. I want to advise anyone, if you are here to talk about one of the two cases we're going to talk about, And if you want your comments to be part of the public record, this would not be the time in the meeting where it would be important for you to speak, because if you speak at this point, your comments will not be a part of the public record. So this really is a point in our meeting where anyone else who is on the phone or online, if you want to make a comment about any particular zoning item or issue that you want to talk about, this would be the time to talk about that, and you would have 3 minutes to do that. So let me ask if there's anyone who wishes to make public comment at this point. Okay, I don't see anyone at this point, but I will, according to the guidelines we are following, I will ask either Eileen or Emily to please check voicemail and email to see if anyone has stated that they wanted to make public comment at this point. We'll wait about 30 seconds for that.
There are no voicemails.
Eileen, are there any emails from anyone?
No emails.
Okay, we will then close this section of our meeting. The next item is receipt of written communication. Let me ask Eileen, is there any written communication that we have received that is not on board docs?
No, everything we've received to this point has been posted on board docs.
Okay, great. We will then close that section of the meeting and move on to business before the committee. First item of business is the approval of minutes of the February 2nd meeting. Can I have a motion to approve and a second from one of the commissioners, from two of the commissioners actually? Commissioner Snyder moves, Commissioner Callaway seconds. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions that anyone wishes to make in the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Eileen to please call the roll to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Callaway. Sorry, Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes, the minutes are approved. So we move on to the first case we have in front of us. Both of these cases we have in front of us are really plan unit development, neither of which are asking for any site development allowances. It's interesting, we have both of these cases here tonight. They are both looking to build industrial buildings for us. So I'm going to ask Eileen, will you be introducing the first case, the Molto Properties Conditional Use Permit?
Yes, thank you. This is case 20P21. The application was filed December 11th of 2020. The request is a conditional use permit for a plan unit development and a plat of subdivision. The applicant is Kevin Mahoney of Molto Properties. The owner of the property is RREEF CPIF 635 West Lake Street LLC with Michael Nigro, Managing Director, authorized signatory. The legal notice for the PUD was published January 14th, 2021. The sign was posted January 15th, 2021. The subdivision sign was posted January 29th, 2021. The mailing was done January 15th, 2021. And the Public hearing was originally scheduled for February 2nd, 2021, and continued to this evening, February 17th, 2021.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just run down for folks who are online and may be interested in this. First thing we'll do is ask the court reporter to swear in anyone who wishes to speak. So in this case, but in the interest of efficiency, if you intend to speak on the next case as well, either as the applicant or as a witness for the applicant, or just want to make public testimony and make sure your voice gets heard, you should raise your hand and be sworn in right now. So I will ask Court Reporter Kiki Andriopoulos to please swear in everyone for this particular evening.
Okay, if you'll all raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause or either cause will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do. I do. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. The process we'll use is at first we'll ask the applicant to testify, and then there will be an opportunity for commissioners to ask questions. After that, we will take public testimony for this particular case. We'll as well check voicemail and email. So if anyone watching this on YouTube wants to make public testimony, you will have to either email or call in just to make sure we know. Then we'll hand it back to the applicant to answer any questions or make any closing comments, and we will then close the public hearing at that point. So I'm going to ask who will be the primary spokesperson for Multo Properties. That will be, and who will that be? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes, that'll be me. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to please give us an idea what you have in mind, just so you know everyone has all the material. We've all read through it, looked through it. Most people are pretty familiar with that site, but give us an idea what you intend to do, and if you want to address yourself to the Conditional Use Standards or the PUD standards as well, please do so. Okay.
Bear with me. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Hold on 1 second.
Good luck.
Eileen, it looks like the host is disabled screen sharing.
Give us just a second here. We'll get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Eileen, do you want to make him co-host, or would you prefer staff share their screen? You are a co-host as well as Assistant City Manager Kopp.
Okay, give me just a second.
Mr. Mahoney, I believe you can now share your screen.
Yes. Let me pull that up. Hold on 1 sec. Okay.
Great.
Actually, I'm going to turn on my video here. Can you guys see me?
Yes, we can. I can.
Okay, great. Well, I apologize in advance to the Bears fans out there. I'll do my best to block the Packer jersey behind me. But good evening, everyone. In all seriousness, we really appreciate your time and consideration tonight of our PUD and subdivision request. This is a project that it's been a long time in the making. We're excited to be here tonight to finally discuss this with you guys, and we think this is going to be a project that's going to be a great addition to the city's strengthening industrial base. Before we jump into the full presentation, just a few quick introductions to the project team in attendance tonight. My name is Kevin Mahoney. I'm a vice president with Multo Properties. A little bit of background on Multo. We are a privately held industrial development company. We're based here in Chicago. We specialize in the acquisition and development of Class A industrial properties we develop throughout the United States. We were founded in 2008. Since then, we've acquired or developed over 12 million square feet of institutional real estate. A good portion of that has been right here in Chicago. As Emily mentioned, we're serving as the development manager for this project on behalf of the owner, owner being Reef Property Trust. Reef is one of the largest real estate investment managers in the world. They have approximately $73 billion in real estate assets globally. And Tate Pino, director with Reef, is in attendance tonight. Civil engineer for the project is Kimley Horn. In attendance from Kimley, we've got Jamie Putnam, Eric Tracy, and Tim Shobrin. So they will be your go-to for any stormwater or traffic-related questions you may have. All right, so I know some of this is probably refreshed and you guys know the site pretty well, but just a quick overview of existing site conditions. This site is roughly 26 acres. It's right at the corner of Lake and Grand. Currently zoned I-1 restricted industrial. It's really at the doorstep of the city's primary industrial district. Presently, it's home to a Caterpillar sales and service center. It's owned by a company out of Iowa called Altifer. Back in 2018, Altifer announced that they had plans to relocate this Elmhurst operation into 4 separate facilities in the greater metro area. And so that's really what unlocked the development potential for this site. So we've owned the property since acquiring it back in January of 2019. Since then, we've been leasing these facilities back to Altifer as they finalize their relocation, which should be complete within the next 45 days or so. Once they do vacate the site, we will commence demo of the existing facilities. We're also going to be performing a significant environmental cleanup to remove and or clean some contaminated soils on site. All that is going to be under the guidance of a formal remediation plan that we've already had approved by the IEPA. Just a couple of general notes on timing. We would expect the vertical redevelopment to commence sometime later this spring, and then we would have a target completion of the development end of 2021 or early part of 2022. Anytime we're looking at development, I think it's always helpful to view it within the context of the current market conditions. And the reality is that we have a very healthy industrial market. Throughout this pandemic, industrial has proven to be a very resilient and very stable property type. The trends that have been accelerated by the pandemic, we've been fortunate that it's only further strengthened our industry. And so from a macro level, if you look at Chicago in 2020, recorded a record number of new leases. When you look at the 1.3 billion square foot Chicago market, you've got a current vacancy rate of 6.7%, which is very healthy. As you drill further down in the Chicago submarkets and you look at areas like we have here in Elmhurst, these continue to be premier industrial locations. They're highly attractive to tenants. You've got great access to interstates, you got proximity to the airport, and you have the relative tax benefits of a DuPage County address. Now, the challenge is that while these are highly desirable locations, they're also highly constrained with respect to new supply. You've got a lot of barriers to entry to developing in these areas. And so when you specifically look at your community in Elmhurst, as of the end of last year, your vacancy rate for industrial properties was right about 4%. That would, without a doubt, place you as one of the top performing municipalities in all of Chicago. It's an impressive number, but it's also reflective of severe supply constraints. And ultimately, a lack of modern facilities is going to greatly inhibit the city's ability to attract, retain, and grow quality corporate tenants in the future. And so our hope and our belief is that this project will address some of those unmet needs and will ultimately make the city more competitive in attracting new companies. Moving over to our proposed site plan, as we talked about, and you guys are aware, this is a large site. It does afford you a lot of flexibility in laying out the site. What we really try to focus on when we were working through the programming for this site was we wanted to put together a layout that was both reflective of where we see market demand for space, given that these are speculative facilities, but we also wanted to recognize and appreciate that this is a highly visible location within the city's industrial corridor. And so in considering those factors, we ultimately focused on what you see here. It's a two-building layout. It's going to provide more of a business park feeling. When you start with that first component I talked about, the demand perspective, these two proposed buildings, they're 175,000 square feet and 256,000 square feet respectively. These are going to be unique offerings for this market. As we talked about, a lot of barriers to entry. These will be very attractive buildings to really a wide spectrum of tenants. On the bigger side, tenants who are looking for larger blocks of space under one roof, which is difficult to find. But we've also we've also designed these buildings to provide maximum flexibility in leasing and demising to smaller spaces in order to capture that smaller to mid-size tenant. Those are really the core occupiers in this market. And so as you look at these two buildings, both can efficiently demise down to as much as 3 tenants. That said, as I mentioned before, these are going to be very attractive as potential single tenant buildings. I think they really will be attractive as a prime corporate headquarters facility location in DuPage County. I think that's especially true if you look at building 1, given that visibility you have at the corner of Lake and Grand. And then in terms of the second component that we were considering when putting together the programming for this site, was again the highly visible nature of this site. We understand that this is really the doorstep of Elmhurst and your industrial corridor, and so we placed extra focus on the orientation of these buildings. As you can see here, we try to maintain the focus of these buildings on what we would call the higher image portion of the buildings, the office storefronts, which is what you're going to see along Lake and Grand. And then conversely, we've strategically located the truck courts towards the back of the site, away from those main thoroughfares and largely out of view from the street. Moving on to traffic and circulation. This is something that we always spend a lot of time on during the design stage. It's something that's always important to municipalities, and it's also important to put together a good design because it's something that is meaningful to tenants, the ingress, egress, and circulation on these sites. And so when we looked at this site, we really focused on 3 things that we typically apply to most sites. We're trying to limit negative externalities to the existing roadway system. We're trying to design a layout that provides good ingress and egress to the site, something that is attractive to users, especially in a spec scenario like this. And then 3, a layout that provides what we would consider good on-site circulation that separates both auto and truck traffic and essentially limits potential conflicts between those two. And so as we've talked about, this is a big site. You've got a lot of design flexibility. But when it comes to the access, we have a few more constraints we're dealing with. We're dealing with 2 different jurisdictions on the traffic side. So Grand Avenue is under the jurisdiction of DUDOT. Lake Street is under IDOT. And so the access points that you see here are reflective of our conversations and input and ultimately approval from both of those entities. So starting northwest corner, access point 1 along Grand. At present, this is currently a full access point. As part of this proposed project, we will be downgrading this to a 3/4 access point per DUDOT. So essentially what this will allow is it'll allow a right into the site, a right out of the site, and a left into the site, but no left out of the site. As you can see here, it essentially leads into the truck court. So this would primarily be the ingress point for trucks entering building 1. As we shift to the east over to Lake Street, looking at that second access point, much like the first one, this is also currently a full access point that will be downgraded to a 3/4 access per IDOT. As you can imagine, this access point is going to be the primary point of auto ingress and egress for both buildings. We would also anticipate that any trucks that are exiting building 1 will likely use this access point to get essentially to 290 via Route 83 because he won't have the ability to take a left out of that Grand exit. In terms of moving over to access point number 3 on the east side of the site along Lake, this is going to be a new full access point. It's going to be at the intersection of Lake and West Street. This is an access point that has been approved by IDOT. We are currently working with them on the intersection redesign for this intersection. This access point will primarily be used as ingress and egress points for trucks entering building 2. Additionally, we would anticipate that any auto traffic from either building 1 or 2 that wants to head east on Lake will likely exit the site here, since again, no left turns out of the site from that center entrance on Lake Street. So as you look at the aisle drive on the southeast corner of building 2, that was really the purpose in creating that connectivity, is to give those autos, you know, and the employees that are working in these buildings, the ability to head east onto Lake. In terms of pedestrian connectivity on site, right now the site plan you're looking at doesn't reflect this, but we will be working with Eileen and her staff to provide a sidewalk that is going to run along Lake Street. So essentially it's going to start where that second curb cut is. It's going to run all the way to that third access point. What it's going to do is it's going to provide connectivity between buildings 1 and 2. It's also going to provide connectivity to that redesigned intersection at Lake and West. Here's a conceptual rendering. I think it highlights the quality of the buildings that we are planning on the site. Specifically, this is a rendering for building 1. So what you're looking at here is essentially what you'd see from the corner of Lake and Grand. A few quick notes on building and construction materials. These are modern industrial buildings. They're precast concrete. They're made of steel. You've got future office areas, as we talked about on both corners, as well as a future center entrance. That's where you have more of the architectural details. You've got a higher image class entryway. We're incorporating a number of different architectural elements into these buildings. That includes reveals in the precast. We're also doing some variation in paint scheme, as you see, all to make the buildings a little more architecturally unique and essentially to break them up. We are also planning extensive landscaping throughout the site. That's certainly something that we like to focus on, especially in a higher visibility site like this. We will be focusing those efforts along Grand and Lake frontage. In general, I know that the city doesn't have design guidelines presently. We're pretty confident in that these buildings will be reflective of any future standards that the city would implement. The next 2 slides, just a couple elevations for each building. Just gives you another perspective of these 2 buildings. This first one is specific to building 1. Just a couple quick things I'd like to highlight. So the south elevation that you see at the top of the slide, that's essentially what you'd see along Lake Street. So again, the focus on the corner office storefronts, you've got that future middle office storefront as well. And then moving to the north side of the building at the bottom of the slide, again, we've situated that and positioned that truck court you know, to basically face the back of the site, limiting any sort of sight lines that you would get from the main thoroughfares. In terms of loading, standard mix of loading dock doors as well as drive-in doors. And you can see we're incorporating a number of clear store windows. It just helps brighten up the warehouse space. It's something that tenants consistently request, and we started to just proactively put these clear store windows into our buildings. Moving over to building 2, you'll see a lot of consistency in terms of design here. It's just going to be on a larger scale. As with building 1, truck court is again oriented towards the back of the site. And then again, you have those 2 corner office storefronts. The one in the southeast corner of this building will have good visibility on Lake, and then on the northwest side of this building should have also pretty good visibility onto Grand. In terms of standards of review, I know in our application we addressed each of these items. Thought it was worth touching on a few of these standards that we thought were most salient and important. In terms of the conditional use standards, as it relates to the project's impact on surrounding property, what we're proposing here, as we discussed, is a modern business park. It's something that is we believe is going to improve the existing streetscape, and we think ultimately it's going to encourage further redevelopment in the city's existing industrial district. In terms of conformity with the city's comp plan, we believe it's consistent with a number of the key objectives in the comp plan, specifically as it relates to, as we talked about, encouraging quality building design, creating economic prosperity for residents, and overall strengthening the city's industrial base. And then finally, in terms of conformity to applicable regulations of the district, as was mentioned to lead off the meeting, we are not requesting any sort of site development allowances as part of this submittal. And then moving over to the PUD standards, a few things worth highlighting. As we talked about traffic, we spent a lot of time designing this project to accommodate the safe movement of car, truck, and pedestrian traffic on site. We also have multiple points of ingress, egress for any sort of emergency vehicle access. In terms of buffering, we've provided for all required setbacks. We've also are working on incorporating above standard landscaping, as we talked about, just to provide additional buffering to any of the surrounding properties. And then lastly, in terms of appearance, we've incorporated, again, modern design features in the buildings. We believe the quality of these buildings is reflective of and also commensurate with the highly visible nature of this site. A few key benefits that I think are worth addressing. We think that will result from a successful project here. First, as we talked about, this is a project that is going to greatly enhance what we would call a key gateway site within your community. And we think it's going to spur and encourage further redevelopment in the city's industrial district. Second, the project is going to improve the city's aging industrial stock. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's critical to have modern distribution space in your community to meet growing demand for these types of buildings. Third, the project is going to create a stable revenue source for the city, long-term property tax revenue with ultimately limited impact on new services required. And then finally, encouraging economic prosperity, again, being a driver for attracting new companies to this community. And hopefully that translates to jobs for residents. So in closing, sincerely appreciate your consideration again of our PUD and subdivision request. This project is a significant long-term investment in this community. It's an investment that I know we're proud to make. We look forward to working in partnership with the city on its redevelopment. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions the commission may have. Also, the project team is here for any more technical questions as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahoney. Let me open this up now for comments or questions from any commissioner. Commissioner Udisky, did you raise? No. Anyone else on the commission? Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Rose. So I was looking for perhaps a response from you regarding the Civil Tech Technical Memorandum and some of the points that they had made. So can we just kind of go through those and perhaps you can provide a response to us on some of their findings. And I want to go to number one, the new left turn lane that is proposed to access point C. We're going to be converting, or it looks like the recommendation is to convert the two-way left turn lane and into a single left turn lane for this site. So is that a requirement? Is that something that's going to be done? Who makes that decision? How is that approved? And then what's the ensuing impact on those commercial properties on south side of Lake Street?
Tim Shogren, are you on?
I'm here.
Great.
It's a great question. So right now, because there is no fourth leg to the West Ave intersection, the turn lane there is bidirectional and really predominantly provides for those movements that are westbound, right? when we add the fourth leg, and because it's a signalized intersection, IDOT's going to require us to convert that into a dedicated left turn lane. This kind of situation occurs up and down the lake corridor, where it's striped because of the signal as a left turn lane for that particular access, but other businesses are able to use that left turn lane. These businesses here are not generating a tremendous amount of traffic, and so my expectation would be that they would continue to use that space for their movements. And we're not putting up any raised curb or anything that would physically prohibit them. So this would operate much like other locations do along the corridor.
So then would vehicles traveling westbound on Lake Street, they would pull into the left turn lane going the wrong way to access those properties on the south side of Lake?
They could, or they could make their movements from the through lane. You'll find that people will do both, and this type of thing occurs along the corridor today.
Okay, and so what's the projected impact on, Lake Street can get quite busy during the peak hours, and if people stopping in one of the through lanes to wait to turn left into one of those other businesses, isn't that going to back up traffic?
It certainly could have some level of minor impact, but again, the volumes are relatively minor. So the occurrences will be atypical. And it's something that, as drivers along this corridor are probably fairly familiar with, as there are a number of locations that have a very similar setup.
Okay, so there's no real safety concerns is what you're saying, since this is something that's done. There's no safety concerns about that. And I understand that while the traffic volumes may be low now, there is potential for redevelopment of those commercial properties at some point in time, which may or may not increase traffic access those sites. So can you just talk a little bit about the safety? What are the safety guidelines for something like that?
Yeah, so there's two pieces to it. First, the volume of traffic that we'll have in our left turn lane will be very small, because we have a left in immediately. If you're coming eastbound on Lake, you'll have already passed a left turn into the site that probably the bulk of our traffic will utilize. So this will kind of be a secondary access. And then second, if the properties on the south side were to develop, just like we've been doing some level of access consolidation, and there's some level of restriction that's being placed on our access. It's a full today. We're converting to a 3/4. It's possible that access consolidation or some level of access restriction may be in place for development on the south side. But for right now, the situation that we're proposing is one that is not atypical and present throughout the corridor.
Okay, and do you happen to know if the property owners or the businesses are aware of this conversion and if they have any concerns about it?
I personally can't speak to that.
Mr. Mahoney, would you be able to speak to that?
Eileen, did we get any public comment related to any of these potential improvements in the public notices that were put out?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Did you say, was there a comment made in the notice that was put out to these businesses regarding this conversion?
Yeah, I was asking, we hosted a community meeting that didn't have any feedback, but I was asking Eileen if there was any additional feedback, because we have not received any feedback specific to these proposed improvements from these businesses.
Okay. All right. I would like to move on to the Civil Tech point number 3. It said the traffic consultant should provide backup to verify that the ITE trip generation rate used accurately reflects the proposed use. Do you have any further comments on that?
So what we did with our traffic analysis reflects industry standards. This is a speculative development, and so that's certainly possible that a user could come in that would generate more traffic than we were projecting in this particular study. It's also possible that it could be less. What we do know is that the site is projected to generate the same or less traffic than was there today. And so even if the traffic that we're projecting were to double, we would still expect that the mitigation that we've identified, the signalization and the 3/4 access, would safely and adequately convey the traffic that's there. Furthermore, typically what you're concerned about in these types of sites is those outbound left turning movements. Those are the ones that create the most friction and often are the most challenging. We are eliminating outbound left turns that exist today at 2 of these locations, and the third has a traffic signal, so it's controlled. So we're doing a lot of things to improve the safety of the access, and believe that it can accommodate what we proposed, and also something that is a more significant generator.
Okay. All right, so moving on beyond the Civil Tech memo, I wanted to ask about potential traffic traveling south on West Avenue. I didn't see a lot about that. Is this, since there's a newly redesigned intersection there at West and Lake, and the potential for cars or vehicles traveling south on West Avenue. So can you talk a little bit about that? West Avenue can really be a challenge, I think, in that area during the peak hours. It gets quite backed up. So can you talk a little bit about how that might be affected?
Just to make sure I'm understanding the question, are you asking as a result of employee traffic potentially flowing through there, or how will this impact the traffic that's there today already?
Well, I'm asking about potential traffic traveling from your site, whether it's employees or trucks. I don't know, who the tenants are going to be.
Sure.
Whether box trucks or, I don't know. I didn't see a lot of projections regarding use of West Avenue. So can you just talk about that?
Yeah, I think given the other, the connectedness of the site to other regional corridors, I would expect there to be a negligible, very little, if any, traffic that would use west because of the other access that's provided, where people can get probably more quickly to regional routes that can get them to and from their homes or where they're doing their deliveries. So I wouldn't expect there to be any meaningful impact on west.
Okay, great. And then one last question about, can you talk about the emergency vehicle access to building number 2? At building number 1, it seems pretty clear that any emergency vehicles or fire trucks would be able to circulate the entire property, but maybe that's not so clear with building number 2. Maybe you can just talk about that a little bit.
I can speak to it quickly, and Kevin can jump in. I think with the 3 access points that are provided, I think there's very good circulation around both of the buildings, even with the 3/4 access that restrict some level of car movement out of the site. Those are all designed to be mountable by emergency vehicles and would not restrict the ability of those types of vehicles to get into or out of the facility. So lots of means of ingress and egress for emergency vehicles.
Well, I think that's pretty clear for building number 1, but for building number 2, it looks like it would be, I guess I'm just wondering, it doesn't look like they could circulate the perimeter of the property because there's some pretty tight turns, particularly in the northwest corner and the southwest corners. Would they just go in and out that access point C, or that 3rd access point?
I think they could. If we don't have it already, I'm sure we can prepare an exhibit showing how they would circulate around the building, but I know that's something that went into the design.
Okay, thank you very much.
I want to piggyback on that. I just want to make sure it appeared to be the case in the materials we provided that IDOT actually is aware of the signal and lane changes at West and Lake Avenue, and have they raised any safety concerns themselves?
We continue to work through their review process, but they have reviewed and approved the traffic study and have asked us to prepare plans, geometric and signal plans for the proposed intersection improvements.
Okay, right. And just want to make sure everyone understands that is IDOT really is the one who will have final authority over that. That is correct, and not the city. Right. Okay. All right. Any other? Commissioner Uditsky?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a follow-up from Commissioner Snyder's conversation on the traffic, in particular with respect to that signal at West Avenue. And I'm just wondering, in your experience, what kind of precautions could be taken, or signage or other measures to prohibit trucks from, just using West Avenue as a cut through to North Avenue? I could see that being enticing, and I certainly understand what you're saying, and that, 83 is right there and all, but North Avenue is a major thoroughfare, right? And it's a nice, short, easy cut through to go right down West Avenue, which is an extremely is a solid residential neighborhood that goes right by an elementary school. So I'm really concerned about that, certainly as a resident of that particular area as well. So what in your experience have you seen, and can we contemplate perhaps here to prevent that from happening?
I think certainly, signage directing that truck traffic to make the turn onto Lake Street as opposed to traveling through. I think working with the tenants to make sure that information about appropriate routes can be distributed has been effective in the past. And certainly, the final one is always enforcement of those restrictions that you all have in place to make sure that, truck drivers from this facility and others are complying with the signage and requirements that you all have. It's kind of the final piece of the puzzle. There's no way to take control of trucks yet. Someday we'll have those self-driving ones and we can program them, but until then, providing signage, clear direction, and enforcement tend to be pretty effective.
I have a question for staff, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I mean, is that something, where we could, given, all the changes that would be going on for this development, where we could put, some sort of restriction on like semi-traffic or something like that on West Avenue?
There currently is restrictions. It's a not truck route. There's a no truck sign right at West, right at West and Lake, and it's for local deliveries only. Any truck that's not entered for local delivery could be ticketed.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I appreciate that, Mike, because that was my understanding as well. And Tim, I'm glad to hear you really talk about tenants, really trying to work with them. They're the ones who govern these trucks, to really make sure they understand what appropriate routing is. So, I understand Commissioner Uditsky's concern about dropping down to North Avenue, but any of these trucks, North Avenue is a much worse route for them than Lake Street. It's just residential, lanes are narrower. It's a harder sell down there, but it's an issue. So, any other? Commissioner Callaway?
This is maybe less of a question, but just picking up on Commissioner Uditsky's question, I think, depending upon what kind of tenants are in this building, and it's probably premature at this point to ask questions about, how many cars do we expect coming in and out of there, because it's going to be, I'm sure, very dependent upon who are the tenants. But I could also see, obviously, increased traffic, non-truck traffic, right? So employees working in those facilities coming down west to access North Avenue. I think that might be a more likely scenario, which certainly, signage that's Chair Rose, you and I are both familiar with the traffic, increased traffic down Emroy coming from McMaster Carr. It's kind of a similar situation. So I again, it's just a point I make. I guess I'm not looking for any kind of clarification on that. And Mr. Mahoney, I just want to say, please don't ever apologize for the Packer flag that's behind you, or Jersey.
I figured there had to be some Packer fans out there. There's a few of them here in Chicago.
Speak for yourself there, Callaway.
Yeah, I'd like to dispute that with Commissioner Callaway myself. So
make sure that goes on the record.
Yeah, I'm not sure what she's talking about there, but okay.
I'm still
I work in Wisconsin, so I understand the piece of it. So any other comments or questions? I think Commissioner Callaway raises a really good point, which is, what you're going to see primarily is employees in their cars. I mean, that's what we see at Emroy and North. So that's what it does. Commissioner Hoffman, and then Commissioner Pittman.
Chair Rose, just a point of clarification in question for the developer. Based upon this being a speculative development, I see now you've got parking, just around 500 between the two buildings, but I'm assuming based upon who occupies, and I think I saw this in some of the literature, that you have the ability to essentially reconfigure and accommodate additional parking depending upon the user. You'd mentioned in your presentation building one potentially as a corporate headquarters. I think in that case, Commissioner Callaway, Snyder, and Uditsky's comments maybe hit home a little bit more, because you have the potential to significantly increase what's going on at that site from just a regular vehicular traffic perspective. So I don't know what, if anything, you can share in regards to your discussion with prospective tenants, but you've got 375,000 square feet. That's a big speculative development, and knowing a little bit more about how that is going to be filled up could potentially be helpful.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. In terms of the parking, what we typically try to hit in terms of a parking ratio is one auto spot per 1,000. So that's pretty consistent with what we've hit here. I think what was mentioned in the staff memo is that in the event that we do get a requirement that has a higher employee count, you do have the opportunity to potentially stripe autos into the truck court. Typically, those higher employee count tenants don't have quite the loading requirements. And so I think really that's just kind of a backup option. I would say you see that more for smaller infill sites that are really constrained on land and parking. As I mentioned in my presentation, we had a lot of design flexibility with this site. And so we were able to add what we think is more than sufficient auto parking for, really the range of tenants that we're going to be attracting here. But yeah, in terms of, the types of tenants, that's always a moving target with the spec building. The benefit is you've got an incredible location here. And so it's going to attract a really diverse range of size companies, also uses. So anything from, third-party logistics companies, e-commerce related companies, food, we're seeing a lot more healthcare type requirements related to the pandemic. So I think you're going to get a lot of interest from really a diverse, strong mix of companies.
Commissioner Pittman. Commissioner Pittman.
Thanks, Chair Rose. I guess mine was more of a comment as well. I understand the concerns about traffic, but I think there is the signage, but there's no through truck traffic, just local deliveries on West. And I think those cut-throughs become a big problem when there's an absence of a better route. And I think one of the reasons why, the developer is seeking this site is because it is highly accessible to 290, 83, and 83 provides the link to 290 and to North Avenue if somebody should want to go down there. Lake Street also provides access to 290. I think you have all these major access points that are much faster to get to if you're utilizing them than cutting through on West Avenue. I'm not saying that it might not increase some traffic in that neighborhood. If people live there, sure, that's going to be the fastest way for them to get home. But I think that the bulk of the traffic is going to seek those larger roads just because it's going to be a better way to get where they're going. Just in looking at the broader spectrum of the access points that are adjacent to this site, I really do think that is the bulk of where people will go. That's just my opinion on the situation.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Burns.
Yes, I was just wondering if the applicant could speak to the stormwater. I see there's going to be 4 detention basins. Looks like the amount of impervious is actually going to be decreased from the existing condition. But if you could just go over that, I'd appreciate it.
Kevin, I can jump in and take that one.
Okay, thanks.
Eric Tracy with Kimley Horn, licensed professional engineer in the state of Illinois. The stormwater on this one is complicated, but we're working pretty closely with city staff and your consultant, James J. Bennett and Associates. We've gone through a couple reviews with them. I'll give you the high level overview of what's going on here, and if you have any follow-up questions, I'd be happy to answer them. This site has a few different existing discharges to Lake and Grand. I'm sorry, can everyone hear me okay?
You're breaking up. There's a lot of breakup, and I don't really see why that is, but you are breaking up a little bit.
Okay, I tried to keep the video off to help with that. So, Jamie, maybe you can jump in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Jamie Putnam with Kimley Horn too. So as Eric was alluding to on the project, we have been working with the village engineer on the stormwater. So the stormwater is broken up into a couple watersheds. There's a small section that will go north of the site. That's an existing condition. And the other part of the storm sewer will head down to the south to Lake Street for IDOT. So following all the standard rules, regulations of DuPage County and the village. And the ponds themselves, for instance, the building 1, the truck dock area, on the north side of the basin, and a portion of building 2 will drain into that basin. So, they all meet the detention basin and also the volume control requirements for the county ordinance.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I will then open this up really for any public testimony. First, let me ask Mike Kopp in the public comment room. Is there anyone in that room who wishes to make public testimony?
There is not.
Thank you. Eileen, can you please check voicemail and email and Emily to see if anyone has called in or sent a voicemail in where they want to give public testimony on this. We'll wait a few seconds to hear from them.
No emails, and Mike is checking the voicemail.
Thank you.
There are no voicemails.
Okay, thank you. We will then close the public hearing on this particular case. It would be one of the things that we certainly will contemplate is deliberation this evening. I want to ask if any commissioner is opposed to deliberating this particular case this evening. Please advise us at this point. And usually that would mean that if the commissioner wanted more information or wanted more time to consider any of the issues. So, seeing none, I will then ask for a motion to approve and a second the application for a PUD for this particular case. Anyone who wants to lead the discussion on this, don't be shy.
I will make the motion.
Commissioner Burns, and is there a second? Commissioner Pittman. All right, Commissioner Burns.
Thank you. Just gonna get my paperwork in front of me. Okay, I'd like to compliment the applicant on a very nice presentation. I do believe that this will help the industrial character of Elmhurst. What's happening is the O'Hare market is being so saturated and land pricing seems to keep going higher and higher. I did see the price paid for this site back in January 19. Price per square foot of land area is what we were seeing around O'Hare several years ago. So all the better for us. So for this planning unit development, the first standard is actually the entire set of 7 conditional uses that we would normally apply. So I've reviewed all those standards in light of the application, that the establishment, maintenance, operation will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. Secondly, that the conditional use would not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity, or diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. Third, that the establishment of the use would not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for the uses permitted in the district. Fourth, that we have adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and facilities being provided. Fifth, that adequate measures have been taken or will be taken to provide ingress and egress to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. Sixth, that the conditional use is not contrary to the objectives of the current comprehensive plan. And seventh, that the conditional use in other respects will conform to the principles and regulations of the district in which it's located. And I find generally that these conditions are met. The most sensitive conditions seem to be from the statements of the commissioners, the traffic. I do concur with, I believe it was Commissioner Pittman's observation on West Avenue. Most likely, whoever the tenants are will draw their employees, not just from Elmhurst, but from the wider area. And it makes a lot more sense to use Lake Street, Route 83, getting over to 290 and so forth, rather than cutting up and down West Avenue, unless you live in the immediate area. So I think that standard is not endangered. So now there are 10 standards for the PUD, the first of which was the conditional use standards. Some of these are somewhat overlapping conceptually with the conditional use standards. The second standard for the PUD is that the plan development should conform with the general planning policies of the city's official plans, which would include our comprehensive plan. That the plan development is designed, located, and operated to not impair adequate light and air to adjacent properties. The plan development, this is number 4, shall include impact contributions to the school district, park district, or city as determined by the city council. So that's outside of our purview, but we expect that that would be the case. 5th is the archaeological, historical, or cultural impact. 6th, parking and traffic, which again sort of repeats what we saw in the basic conditional use standard. 7th, that there's the adequate buffering. We did see the applicant talk about their landscape plans. 8th, that performance is assured. And this really is to make us feel good that the applicant not only has a good plan on paper, but they're actually going to carry it through on the schedule that they're proposing and will wind up with the improvements that they say they're going to put there. That's the presentation on that is credible. 9th is appearance. We did get a complete overview and elevations and massings that provide a very satisfactory appearance, in my opinion. And then signs, the sign package will be consistent with the character of the development. There are no site allowances being requested, so that will all be within the requirements of the zoning district. So in all, I feel like this is a good application. I think this is a good use for the property. We certainly wouldn't want a prominent intersection like this to remain vacant. Caterpillar, they'd already announced they were scattering to other locations. So to have this site refilled with a more modern 32-foot clear industrial properties, pair of properties is very encouraging, and I would support the application.
Thank you. Commissioner Pittman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. As always, Commissioner Burns has given a very thorough analysis. I concur with everything he set forth. I would add that I also think this is a key industrial site, and I think that this will be a great use of that property for Elmhurst. I also appreciate that the applicant did not seek relief under the bulk zoning. I think that was also a big positive, that they stuck with the zoning code and weren't asking for a bunch of allowances. I think that they did a great job in really thinking through the ingress and egress and cleaning up that on the site. And I'm in favor of approving it.
Thank you. Any other commissioner wishes to make a comment? Any of this? Commissioner Snyder?
Thank you, Chair Rose. Yes, I just want to compliment the applicant for pursuing multiple buildings rather than just proposing one giant, enormous facility, which I suppose you easily could have pursued. So I appreciate that you've taken that approach and the high-end look and appeal of the facility that you're proposing. And it's an important gateway to the city. It's been an eyesore for a long time for those of us that live in the vicinity, which I do. I remain concerned for the commercial properties on the south side of Lake Street and the potential for their desirability being impacted if they're ever redeveloped at some point in terms of that two-way left turn lane being appropriated as a single-use left turn lane or converted to a single-use left turn lane. But certainly that wouldn't prevent me from supporting this proposal. I just think it's something to be aware of. So I'll be supporting this as well.
Thank you. Any other commissioner? Seeing, I'd also like to comment on that. I think it's an important fact that the neighborhood meeting that was conducted, and I know that business owners were really invited to come, et cetera, and they did not. I share Commissioner Snyder's concern, but I think the businesses also have a responsibility to come and say something about that. What happens in the future? You know, we're not really going to know about that, but I think that we will have an opportunity to reconfigure that if in the future what we start to see is a different kind of development that is starting to show up on the south side. I think we will have some opportunity to do that. I am impressed that, I'm not always impressed with IDOT and their concerns and their attention to safety, but the fact that they are working with them and reviewing it is a positive in my mind. So I'm happy to support this particular application, which I think was actually really well done. And I want to compliment the applicant as well on the look of the project. It doesn't look cookie cutter warehouse. I think it was very well done. And I appreciate, while we do not have design elements for, or design requirements rather, for industrial property, I think as we start to look at redoing of our zoning code, that may be an area that we're going to start to focus on. And I think that will serve the residents of the city well. So any other comments before we call the question? We have one more issue. After we call the question, we're not completely done. We have one more motion we'll need to make, since this is also an application for a final plat of subdivision. If you remember, they're going from 3 lots to 2. So that's an important point, as came up in a case several weeks ago. It's really important that get done, that we just not build onto something and keep the underlying 3 lots there. That will cause problems for us all the way down the line. So any other comments before I ask Eileen to call the question? Call the roll, rather. So, okay. Eileen, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. And before I call the roll, I do want to make one comment for the subdivision motion. There is a recommended condition with the subdivision as well regarding some easements. Okay. Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman?
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Commissioner Ditsky?
Yes.
Chair Rose?
Yes. Thank you. That motion is approved. This will then go back to the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee. As you saw in the report, they've already, with our new PUD, our ordinance is not necessarily all that new anymore, but DPZ, the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee, has already heard the preliminary facts in this case, and so it will return to them for decision making. We do need a motion for approval of the final plat of subdivision, but I would call your attention to the last page of the staff report that the following condition would be recommended if the request is approved: that the applicant shall work with the city to prepare maintenance agreements and assign easements to the properties to provide for stormwater maintenance, cross-access for the properties in the event that they are under separate ownership in the future. So in case these 2 properties, they're going to be broken into 2 lots instead of 3, come under separate ownership, that the condition to be placed on it would that the applicant would work with the city to really develop these maintenance agreements and easement agreements on the properties. So that being said, can I have a motion to approve the final plat of subdivision that re-subdivides this from 3 lots to 2 lots? A motion to approve and a second. Commissioner Snyder moves. Is there a second? Commissioner Uditsky. Commissioner Snyder.
Yes, I just think it makes a lot of sense to grant this subdivision, so I'll be supporting it.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yeah, I feel the same and echo Commissioner Snyder's comments.
Any other comments on this? Okay, and which I'll just say again, this is very wise because we want to take this into the future. And in a residential case that we had a few weeks ago, those kinds of things were not necessarily done, and neighbors were shocked that it wasn't. So I think this is a good move and it makes some sense. So it will be approved with the condition. Is that correct, Eileen? Okay. So any other comments before we call the roll? All righty. Eileen, please call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky?
Yes.
Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman?
Yes.
Chair Rose?
Yes. All right, the final plat of subdivision is approved. Does that go to DPZ? So all of this will go to DPZ. And do we have a date when it will return?
It will most likely go to DPZ this coming Monday. I'll confirm that with the applicant tomorrow.
Okay, right. So this will return to the Development Planning and Zoning Committee of the City Council, which is the second step in our three-stage process. So we wish you all the best. Looks like a great project. I'm very, very glad to see this piece of property really moving forward. And everything that we hear over and over is the lack of this kind of modern industrial warehouse space. So I'm glad to see us moving forward and making plans for the future. So great. Good luck to you, Mr. Mahoney, and everyone else. So,
thanks, everyone.
Okay. I will now move us on to the next case. And Eileen, are you taking this one as well?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So the next case we will be taking is the Dermody Properties conditional use permit for a plan unit development with, it said with site development allowances, but they have been removed. Is that correct?
Correct. No site development allowances.
So there are no sites. So even our agenda says that, but that has been removed. There will be no site development allowance. And again, this is for the purpose of constructing an industrial building. Eileen, can you introduce this to us?
Thank you. I'm going to do just a brief introduction of the dates and when the application was filed. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mike Kopp. He is going to do a brief overview of the adjacent intersection of the property and show a concept plan for that intersection as well. So this is case number 20P20. The application was filed December 8th, 2020. It's a request for a conditional use permit for a plan unit development. Neil Driscoll of DPIF 3 Illinois 8 Riverside Drive LLC, doing business as Dermody Properties, is the applicant, and the property owner is Sampson Land Investments LLC. The legal notice was published January 28th, 2021. The sign was posted January 29th, 2021. The mailing was done January 29th, 2021. And the public hearing is this evening, February 17th, 2021.
Okay, thank you very much. Assistant City Manager Mike Kopp, can you just give us an overview, I think, of some of the city's planning and history for this intersection?
Yes, I'm going to pull something up the share screen here. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. This drawing that's up here is on board docs. I think you can all see it. Back about 25 years ago, just start off with anybody who traversed this intersection at any time, there's certain times when it's a challenge to get through with the converging of Monroe, Riverside, and the two frontage road, all accessing prior to the entrance Route 83. So the city had a concept done probably about 25 years ago, and it was similar to what you see right here. And in fact, if you look at we've been working towards this slowly with when the opportunity come about, we try to take advantage of it. As an example, when the animal hospital went in there, you see the property line, it actually curves exactly like this road does right here. So when that property was, there's some dedication of the property right there. It was designed so this could eventually happen. Now, with the opportunity with this new development going here, the developer has agreed to work with us to make this concept work. Right now, it's something that we developed years ago. When the opportunity would be here, we would try to take advantage of it. There's no funding for this to be done right now, but we think because it's effective of Route 83, which is an IDOT road, and we think this would be rate high for grant dollars. The issue is the next opportunity for grant dollars for the type of project is January of 2022. We will be applying for it. We'll do some engineering prior to doing this. Even this drawing right here is a little more detailed than what we had originally when we did it. Civil Texas did it recently, and they put this so the turning radiuses are all accurate as far as for truck traffic and whatnot. So this would work. If you look at the plans right now that Germany has out there for this project, right where this road goes through is one of the detention basins. They've agreed to work with us, to work with our engineering department right now, to possibly make this detention area smaller, and the other two they have on their site possibly larger if there's a possibility to do it. We've also agreed that if the time comes when this is able to be done, that we would even think about doing some type of land swap. If you look up at the higher part of this drawing, there's an area that we own there where it's actually Sugar Creek goes through there. It's a Salt Creek. There's some land there too that possibly may be able to use for stormwater if it has to be displaced. Or part of the project would be underground the detention right there if they cannot find another place to do it on their site. But I just want to let you guys know there's a history to this intersection, and that we've been trying to take advantage as development is happening in this area to make this happen, because that intersection can be a difficult intersection at times. The way it all converges there, and with the timing on Route 83 light, I'm sure that the Germany engineer will talk about these intersections, how they all work, the level of service and whatnot. We think there's a way to allow some stacking in there so you don't have that convergence on that intersection during some of the peak times. So I just want to get that out there to let you know that this is something that we've been working on as a city to be able to do it. They've agreed to work with us to make it happen when we have the ability to do it. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mike. I just have one question for sure. I know that funds will not be available until January of 2022. Does that mean that's when we would submit a grant, or we would submit a grant before then, and funds might be, if we were lucky enough to get it, the funds would be available then? Could you just clarify that? That's the grant application period. We would have to do some engineering on this to have it ready for the grant dollars also. So we would hope that in 2021 we can do all the engineering we would need to do to apply for the grant. And do you have any estimate of how long it would take us if we got that grant money? We know that's the end of the grant period. If we got it, when we'd get it, and when I know this is a conceptual drawing that we did, and I know the city has been working on this for a number of years. How long it would take us to reconfigure this? I mean, our best case scenario, probably end of 22, early 23 to do the construction if everything worked out well. Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions of Mike before we actually hand it over to the applicant? Okay. Can you? Yeah. I have a question. I'm sorry, I can't see. Yes, Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you. Well, grant funding is not assured. So if we do not receive grant funding, what other options for funding do we have? Then it becomes a prioritization of the city council as far as capital improvement dollars. And we do roadway improvements every year. It's a prioritization of what those dollars will be used for. Right now, if you see what we've done over the last 8 years, prioritization has been stormwater projects. But this is an area that we know needs improvement. And it would be a matter of the city council prioritizing the capital improvement dollars for this project. What the success of that would be, I can't tell you that. But we do feel that this project would be a good project for grant dollars. Okay, thank you, Mike.
So that prioritization, I understand how that works. Every year they reprioritize it. And can you give us some idea where it is in the priority pipeline? High, medium, just do it high, medium, low. Right now, we don't need the numbers. It's barely in the pipeline, I'll put it that way right now, because this is something that just came up when they get the contract on this property and said, hey, there's an opportunity to start talking about this.
you know, part of this, even if we got a grant, most likely it's not going to be 100% grant. There'll be a grant sharing. So in 2021, when we start doing the budget for 2022, we will start evaluating what the cost of this project, what we think the split would be. And at that point, the city council will, you know, hopefully at least budget the dollars for, they'll budget the complete project. And normally to the projects like this, we budget the complete dollars with the funding being from the grant. So we don't get the funding, then it's another decision. But we'll have the money in there for our share, and we'll have the full funding for the whole project in there. The grant, but the source of those funds will be grant dollars for the proportion, like if a 70-30 split. And if we don't get those dollars, then the city council's made the decision: do we use other dollars to do that? Do we do a GO bond? But it's up to that. Then the decision becomes different.
Right. Okay. And so that whether this project is approved or not may have some impact on that.
Correct.
So, okay. All right. Thank you. You can take down this thing at this point. All right. We would like, who will be?
Rose, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Pittman.
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to get some clarification on this conceptual plan and how it relates to what's being proposed tonight. Would there be any changes? It looks like a majority of what you're envisioning as a potential new interchange over there would be going through that detention basin, but it also seems like it might infringe on the footprint of the what's being proposed in terms of the actual building. I guess.
No, you know, I do have a overlay of it with the building in place. It does not affect the building at all.
It doesn't. Okay.
One of the things, this is like the first time we met with this group. We said, hey, this is something we really want to do, and they worked with us on their design to, if there's ever a possibility to happen, that it could happen. The only issue becomes now is the stormwater detention, and this, you know, this area has been recently improved. The FEMA flood elevations have been changed recently, so it's helped this a lot, but there's still some stormwater detention issues. There's still some, I think, way at the eastern portion, there's still some floodway, there's still some floodplain, where before it was pretty much all floodplain and some floodway. So it's a matter of, can they work out the engineering for the detention elsewhere? So this could just be open land for the future possibility. If not, then it's going to be a decision of whether we underground it at some point or do some kind of land swap type of thing to be able to redo their detention if it can all work out.
Okay, great. That's super helpful. And then when you said that the city owns some land, is that the land that's east of the proposed parking area that you're talking about?
It's right between, it's actually right just east of Route 83, that little area where the frontage road used to go through, but it would not be with this area now.
Got it.
The exit's in the upper portion of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask Eileen to please.
Chair Rose.
Commissioner Snyder, sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback off of Commissioner Pittman. And this is something I noticed as well. And I used my mad photoshopping skills to do my own overlay with the proposed intersection proposal and the new facility. And while it doesn't infringe on the building, Mike, maybe, I don't know if you took a look at this as well, it does appear that it might make the westernmost docks unusable because they would be so close to the stop sign. Essentially, I don't know that there would be enough room there for a semi truck to do essentially a U-turn to make it into the new intersection. So Mike, do you have that overlay that you did, and is that posted on board docs somewhere?
No, it's not on board docs. I don't have access to that right now.
Okay, I could share the overlay or email it to Eileen that I did, showing what I'm looking at, just so that the.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is conceptual at this point right now. I mean, if that is truly an issue, it's going to have to be worked out. There's no doubt. I mean, I can visualize what you're saying. I don't see it on here right now.
Okay, maybe you.
Right. So this is conceptual. This is really not set in stone at this point. This just is a way for the city to show that this is something that city's been pondering. And if all, the dominoes fall into place, there would have to be much further refinement of it, I would think.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was appropriate for Mike to post that overlay he did as well for everyone to see.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Yeah, probably not at this point. So, okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay, are we ready to go to the applicant? Okay, let me introduce it to you. Eileen, I want to introduce this. Given the dates. Didn't you do that?
Did that, yeah.
Oh, she did it. Thank you. All right. Let me ask Mr. Driscoll, Neil Driscoll, you are going to be speaking about this case. You're the petitioner. Can you please give us an idea what you're talking about and what you're looking for, and we will move forward.
Sounds great. First, I have to say, it's amazing to me how many similarities there are between the first project and the second. I don't know if you guys intentionally did that, but I also have to admit, as of 2 months ago, we became proud third generation Packer season ticket holders. So I'm in that same boat as well. I apologize. Anyway, we
may have to close this meeting right now.
I couldn't help myself. I sent over to Eileen a PDF presentation that we put together. I can try to take a whack at it from here, Eileen, or if you wanted to run it from there, what's most convenient?
It's up to you.
I'll take a whack at it. I'm
okay.
I'm not 100% certain it's going to work successfully coming from PDF, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay, give me just a minute. I'm having trouble, even though I'm a co-host, I'm having trouble sharing the screen. So give me just a minute here.
Okay.
Mike, can you give Neil access to share the screen? I'm having trouble doing it.
Eileen, would you like me to?
If you can.
Sure. Neil Driscoll, or I can share right now. Thank you. Does this work for you, or would you prefer?
No, that would be fine. If you can maybe just blow it up a little bit.
Yeah, just make, all right.
Thank you.
Just need to make it larger. Great.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thanks again for everyone's time. I think you actually created a special session to sort of fit in what you guys appear to have as an extremely busy schedule. So we thank you for that. Again, I was only half joking about the similarities between this project and the last. We think this provides great benefit and opportunity for the city of Elmhurst as well. And I won't go back and rehearse Kevin's really fantastic description of what's happening in industrial real estate in Chicago, but more specifically around the airport. But I certainly agree with 100% of what he said. It's a great time to have opportunities like this to be able to present to your community, particularly because I think there's so much residual value that Elmhurst will benefit from bringing these new buildings and therefore new companies into their community, just from the general patronage that all those employees create within Elmhurst. Our first slide here is just two different rendering locations, just to give you a little bit of sense for what the quality of this future building will be. We at Germany spent a lot of time really focused on the aesthetic component of this. Typically put a lot more glass on our buildings than others because it just sort of, in our opinion, elevates sort of the image, number one, but also sort of that sense of ownership from our future tenant base. If you could flip the two, please. Just to give a quick description of our project team. Again, my name is Neil Driscoll, and I'm the Midwest partner for Dermody. My senior project manager, Jim Nass, wasn't able to join us tonight because he's on a call for a project down in Reno. Our architectural partner is Partners in Design, Werner Brisky, who's on the call tonight. And then from Kimley Horn, we have Jamie Putnam, Eric Tracy, as well as Tim Sorensen, all of which were on the previous call. So just another sort of parallel between the two, which is, I guess, kind of fun, but certainly means they've got a good understanding of what's happening in Elmhurst. If you jump forward again, please. Actually, maybe one more. Just for a quick background on who Germany Properties is as a company, we're a privately owned development company that we're actually based out of Reno, Nevada, but we've got headquarters here in Chicago, where I sit, where our president as well as our chief investment officer sit. We're essentially coast to coast and have a very sort of, I guess I'd say, robust development pipeline from the far northwest all the way through to the northeast. Next one, please. There's just a description of all those markets that I mentioned, and then one more. Thank you. Here's just a quick graphic representation of some of the tenants that we either currently work with or we built buildings with in the past. A lot of sort of household names that you all recognize, I'm sure. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize for the clunkiness of not operating this myself. Here's an aerial of the subject site. It's actually bisected right where you see the word subject site by the creek that Mike referenced previously. And so it actually creates some pretty unique challenges as it relates to how you find a way to redevelop this site. Next one. Here's essentially a street side view of the current property. It's a concrete products sales location. There's also a handful of tenants who lease yard space on the current site. And if we flip to the next one, you'll see an elevation of that future view from, this is from Riverside Drive. All right, next one. This is another street side view from essentially the intersection of Monroe, which is on the left side of the page, and Riverside, which is on the right. So it's looking as if you're essentially out on 83. And the next one will conversely show you what that rendering and elevation will look like in the future. This also shows the compensatory storage pond that we were talking about previously. As Mike and Eileen both mentioned, this is something that we had created in the beginning when we were talking about setting the building back far enough that we could help to accommodate the alignment in the future. We've now, through communications, taken that a step further to suggest that not only will we commit to conveying this land over to Elmhurst to make this reconfiguration, but we will likely relocate some of that compensatory storage now so that we all can save the short and long-term cost of that relocation when the road alignment comes through. Next slide, please. We have a set of elevations for each side of the building. What you're seeing on the top is essentially the southern elevation that'll face the car parking. This building is designed to accommodate 3 or 4 tenants. So you can see very large glass features on both of the corners, as well as a primary feature along the middle, again with 2-story glass to give it sort of that taller office appearance. The middle section is essentially what you're going to see on the dock wall. That would be what faces Monroe. And then the other drawings are just sort of details of exactly that. Next one, please. Looking at the site plan overall, you can see again where we're setting the building back from Riverside and Monroe to be able to accomplish that future alignment. We're pushing the majority of our detention to the far east side on both the building side as well as the car parking side. Again, we've got this unique aspect of the creek that we're trying to overcome. And so the plan is to essentially create 2 bridges that'll cross over for pedestrian as well as car traffic, not for truck traffic at all. But we're really excited about this. As I mentioned, we've got a facade with a lot of glass that I think sort of gives a quasi-office feel to it. And we're very confident that in creating these bridges over the creek, it's also going to create a really kind of interesting corporate sort of feel to this industrial building, which we're pretty excited about. And then just to the south of it, you'll see we've got a small lot for our tenants to be able to park their trailers. And the concept is because this site, again, because of the creek, is rather condensed in its depth, there's really no way to accommodate what modern industrial tenants are typically looking for, which is a handful of trailers that can complement their docks to allow for that transition between empty trailers and full trailers as they're moving inventory in and out of their warehouse. So we're accomplishing that by putting it to the south of the building. Next one, please. Alternatively, and this really came up as a result of Eileen and I talking through the car parking requirements for the site relative to what those future tenants might look like. We put together an iteration of the drawing which would show those trailers as cars instead of truck trailers, just to essentially prove out that we could accommodate more employee parking if the office components of the building was increased more than what we initially anticipated. And one more, please. These next drawings get a little bit granular in their detail, so I won't go into too much of that unless there are particular questions we hit either now or at the end. This essentially is just a plan that shows our pavement surfaces. One thing I would note that I failed to mention before, we're very concerned about the sort of the potential conflicts between cars and trucks. And so those bridges, again, are designed only for car traffic and for pedestrian traffic. We've got a very hard turn essentially from the bridges crossing over to the north, so that tractor trailers know they can't try to make a right turn and kind of loop around to Monroe Street. They'll use the access points off of Riverside to move those empty trailers back and forth, just to minimize any safety concerns that might arise. Next one, please. This is simply a grading plan. I don't think there's a ton to talk about here unless anyone wants to geek out with any of the engineering details, but that's why I've got Jamie and Eric on the phone if we want to answer any of those. Next is utility plan. Again, gets into the weeds, but we want to make sure we presented this in case anyone wanted to discuss at that level. And then finally, a landscape plan that really defines how we're going to dress up the front of the building along Riverside and Monroe, and also account for, again, as I mentioned, what we think is going to be a really attractive car parking area south of the creek, and also, to create that visual screening to make sure that this looks as pretty as possible from Riverside Drive. And finally, back to the elevations. I thought I would take a few minutes to go through the conditional use standards as well as the PUD standards. I won't hit every single one of them as they are a bit redundant here and there, but I want to sort of hit on the highlights, particularly understanding how important and concerning the potential traffic issues are for the existing neighbors. Regarding the standards of conditional use, The future development will have a very positive impact on the neighboring properties in terms of its use, but also valuation. The building and car parking have been set back substantially nearest the interchange of Monroe and Riverside, as I mentioned, to accommodate that future alignment. Additionally, currently to the south of the creek, we've heard issues from staff that existing gravel lot, which is really used for trailer storage, has created traffic as well as road maintenance concerns. In the future plan, as you note, we're actually reducing the size of that gravel area by almost half and instead paving it. So I think from both the traffic as well as a maintenance standpoint, it's going to be dramatically improved. Our project is going to deliver, as you saw in those drawings, a Class A industrial building that I think will attract very complementary businesses to the area and to the community of Elmhurst. All the necessary infrastructure exists in place to service the future facility and will not create any additional demand on the city of Elmhurst. Additionally, the future development meets the objectives of the comp plan. And finally, the plan development complies with the applicable regulations in the industrial district. So we feel highly confident that what we're presenting aligns very well with what Elmhurst wants to see in this area. Regarding the plan unit development standards, the project design will meet all standards and requirements related to the light, air, and safety for the facility regarding the facility itself, as well as the neighboring buildings. Again, the plan development will not require any public facility resources, either from the school district, from the park district, or from the city in general. And the plan development has no impact on known archaeological, historical, or cultural resources. Finally, getting back to, again, the primary concern that we heard during the neighborhood meeting, we designed this site plan to provide both safe and convenient access for cars and trucks, both within site and for adjacent neighbors. We've added a full fire truck loop, which will circle the site to make sure there's always access in the case of an emergency. In addition to that, as we mentioned, we've been working with the city for quite a long time to try to find a way to sort of, as Mike said, prepare ourselves to take advantage of this opportunity when it arose. I think there are really three main ways in which we're adding a lot of value to the city of Elmhurst. The first of which is this piece that we're talking about conveying, which is probably at a minimum 3/4 of an acre. We're committed today to essentially set in place the structure to be able to convey that land over to the city of Elmhurst. I guess you could make the argument, the alternative, if this site is not redeveloped and at some point in time the city wants to move forward with this realignment, there's going to be some sort of condemnation or taking to be able to accomplish that. There's obviously a cost associated with that. And at this point in time, what we're suggesting is that we're going to do that without any cost to the city. So as it relates to trying to create this grant in the future, I think the burden of both the land value as well as the relocation of the comprehensive storage goes away today. So that's number one. And number two, the relocation of that comp storage immediately. And then finally, we want to try to make this a beneficial opportunity to improve the area, not only for ourselves, but for the adjacent neighbors. We fully recognize that traffic is already a challenging issue at this location. We've got traffic studies which suggest that we're not going to be negatively impacting that any more than, quite frankly, it already is. It needs to be fixed. And we think that we're providing a development that creates a catalyst to help accommodate that. The other piece I would mention is that this is a very significant investment for Dermody Properties. I mean, this is a $25 million project. We certainly wouldn't do that if we anticipated having a building that was going to create traffic congestion issues for our tenants on the first day they move in. So we're excited about this project. We're hopeful that we can find a solution that accommodates the needs of our neighbors, as well as the city of Elmhurst, and can deliver what we think will be a very successful project. So that is sort of the genesis of our interest, and we'd love to answer questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Driscoll. Questions from the commission? Any commissioner have questions on this? I have a question for you. I just really, which is about the neighborhood meeting. How many people attended? From your perspective, what you heard from the neighbors? I know you thought you heard traffic, but how many people actually from that neighborhood attended?
I don't have the exact number offhand, but I think it was at least a dozen. I mean, it was a very well attended call, I thought. And in terms of the general tone, what we heard was a concern over an issue that they all felt was sort of long overdue to be addressed, but at the same time, a general interest in finding a solution. And I think including a couple of gentlemen who might be on the call today who said that they certainly aren't against the development. They just want to make sure that something is done in the long term to address the current congestion.
I asked that because I know that's a very active community. In the first, they have been concerned about that intersection for a while, certainly from at least the time when City Garage went in. And how long ago was that, Mike, that City Garage was built there?
It was about 20 years ago.
That's what I thought. I was going to say that's probably about 20 years. So I know it's a very active community. So that's great. So you had 12 people. They're concerned about the intersection. Anything else you heard that you think, oh yeah, maybe we could, that you might have modified plans, or you think we could, or that was primarily what you got from them?
That was really the primary response was the question of what the impact would be.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Uditsky.
Yeah, just following up on Chair Rose's questions about the neighborhood meetings. Was anyone from any of the businesses across, I guess there's really only two, Monroe Street there, and did they express any concern about, kind of how the trucks are going to be going in and out?
Again, in general, yes, but nothing specific. One of the things we did talk about for a while was the way the building is oriented with the truck court facing Monroe. And the idea behind that is all the trucks get the benefit of the entire length of Monroe to essentially queue for that light to change, as opposed to, trying to find a way to flip the building, in which case it just adds to, really is, one of the primary concerns is what happens on Riverside.
And would they, in terms of like backing up into the building, any concern about, obviously they're queuing up that way, but they're coming in, I assume, and kind of using Monroe to back up, sort of do a 3-point turn and.
Right. So maybe Eileen could speak to this, but essentially half of the road is part of the current property. So part of the approval will be a dedication. But yes, the idea is, since Monroe is essentially a dead end, that part of that maneuvering will happen on the road.
Yeah, that's why I ask about there's really only two businesses across the way. Like you said, it's a dead end. I'm sure there's not a whole ton of really very little traffic going there, but
right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Other questions from Commissioner Pittman?
Thank you, Chair Rose. I guess I had some questions about the neighborhood meeting, and were the residents there from that neighborhood that's south along Riverside Drive? Because that's kind of a cut through currently. I've taken that cut through a number of times, and I guess I'm worried because, once again, this isn't something that you guys have created, but there is a serious traffic issue at that intersection. And I'm concerned about the bottleneck at Monroe Street with both the trucks and the employees that are going to be generated from the site, and that the employees are going to, maybe not when they are headed to the site, but when they're leaving the site, if they're headed south into the southern communities, we'll take that Riverside Drive to cut over to Butterfield. And so I'm wondering whether you heard some comments about that and what the traffic consultant thought about that as well.
Yeah, so I don't think that the notice extended far enough south to actually get to any of the residential. So as I recall, 100% of the people who joined the call were all business owners or representatives of business owners in the close proximity, but would definitely like Tim to make a comment, if you could, Tim, about the results of that traffic impact study, as well as the additional recon that we did at the request of Elmhurst.
Sure. Hey again, everybody. The traffic study that we did look at the potential for some level of traffic to come to and from the south. You know, the employees, we tend to find the fastest way to work. And so my expectation is that there would be some level. We are talking about something that's going to generate a really small number of vehicles in total, about, you know, a vehicle every 2 minutes. So I think we had in our study about 5 or 10% of that traffic. So, you know, call it a vehicle every, 15 to 20 minutes that may choose to take that route down south. So we believe the impact on that neighborhood would be relatively minor. Will there be some people that do it? Absolutely. But I think the impact will be relatively small.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my only other, I guess, comment is that, I would like to see that site redeveloped and cleaned up. It's kind of a mess right in that area, but the traffic obviously is a concern. It's a real issue. So, but I like the idea of the project. Thank you.
There are questions from commissioners. Okay, Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Rose. Yes, I'm just wondering about the lag or how much time there might be between the completion of the project and the commencement of operations on the site and the reconfiguration of that intersection. Like, how long do you think that could go on for? I mean,
So our plan is to try to get the building completed by the end of 2021. And then it sounds from Mike's comments before that it might be like 12 to 18 months after that.
Okay, so maybe a year and a half that all of the businesses in that area would have to deal with this challenging intersection. Is that right, Mike?
Most likely. I'd like to mention that maneuver that Commissioner Pittman talked about going down Riverside Drive is actually an illegal maneuver. Once you pass the public works garage, it's a do not enter sign. So you are taking a risk by making that maneuver, but just so you're aware of that. But yes, I mean, there could be an overlap. I mean, it could be 18 months. Like I said, my best guess scenario is end of 22, beginning of our construction season of 23 to make this happen if everything would fall into place.
Okay, and then what kind of, in the interim period, what kind of safety improvements could be made? I mean, I went through that intersection a few times, and I'll tell you, during peak times, it is not an easy thing to negotiate. Just today, I went through it again. Cars queue up all through that were queued up all through that intersection. There were 2 semi trucks who had a challenging time making it into the intersection at all because of the number of passenger vehicles. I mean, it's really kind of a mess. So if we're looking at 18 months of that, what improvements temporarily could be made to aid that situation? Or,
well, as you're asking me, or the traffic person?
Either one, really.
I mean, part of this situation, look at the traffic analysis, and we agree with it too. Their impact on this intersection, it's a level of service as an F right now. And they're talking about an increased number of traffic based on their analysis, and our engineer looked at it also and agreed that it's less than 1% increase on that intersection. It's a difficult intersection, there's no doubt. That's why we've been talking about this for years and years to be able to do it. People, it's normally known traffic for that intersection. People use that intersection are people that mostly work in that area or make deliveries in that area. They understand the complexity, like our public works garage friends, all our public works employees, they know the complexity of that intersection. And though it's difficult, it somehow works. I mean, we don't have a lot of like accident reports for that intersection. I mean, it's difficult. There's no doubt. I'll never argue with that on that. But we will look at it again to say, is there something we should be doing differently than we're doing right now? I don't know what we could do. We've talked about different opportunities to not even like to close off like the frontage road right now coming from the south possibly. And then, you know, there's not that many businesses down at the end of that, but it becomes difficult for anybody goes down there and then turn around, then you're turning around inside a business type thing. So it becomes difficult to make any kind of just like temporary changes to it, I think. But I mean, like again, part of the engineering study, I think maybe that's part of what we do for the engineering study, to take a look at it this year and say, there are temporary things we do right now that will make it a better intersection.
Okay.
But Commissioner, Snyder, if I could just respond to part of that, I just want to clarify something. We have a supreme sensitivity to the concern that the adjacent businesses have, but our development is not really changing anything from what's already either there in general around us, but also the current operation. So if you take a look at what's happening right now at south of the creek, there are over 70 tractor trailers that park in there, and those are moving in and out every day, right? We're cutting that number in half. So I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that I think for a moment that this development is going to make the intersection any worse than it is. It's not great, but again, we're willing to make a $25 million, commitment, knowing that in the short term, it's not great, but it's manageable. But in the long term, this development will make it a lot better for everyone.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, I'm ever hopeful that these are the kinds of things that really may spur an issue like this intersection to move up the pipeline in really budget priorities for the city. You know, right now it's annoying. Everyone knows it's problematic, but there's not a lot of impetus perhaps to do something. But when you start to see development occurring there, that's the very kind of thing that, and maybe it's just my sense of hopefulness, that has the potential to spur this issue moving up to the top of the agenda. So we'll see. So other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Pittman and then Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I wanted to follow up on something that Mike said. Mike, you mentioned that, was it Riverside? You said that traffic isn't allowed to go south past the Public Works building?
That's correct.
Okay, good. All right.
We're doing it illegally. There's two do not enter signs right there. The reason that there is to be able to pass through there is because the buses at the Salt Creek Elementary School right there need that access for the buses. But as far as a passenger vehicle be able to drive south past Public Works garage, you can do it. There's a way to get through, but it's an illegal maneuver if you do it.
Okay, because I've never driven down that way south, just the frontage road. So anybody who parks in that employee parking lot would have to go out the Monroe intersection or backtrack down the frontage road from there.
That's correct. You're right. You go to the frontage road down to Butterfield Road. That is correct, but you can't get it through Riverside Drive.
All right. Well, but that's a good thing that they wouldn't be able to get down that way. So I wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
That was a particular component when the city garage went in, which is why I say this is a very active community. That was really one of the safeguards that was put in, really to try to protect the integrity of that particular community. So, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thanks, Chair Rose. Just, I guess, first off, Mr. Driscoll, I like what you're planning here, what you're proposing. Much like Commissioner Pittman has mentioned, I think an improvement to that area is needed, and this seems like a use that fits. With that being said, I guess, what level of concern that you have based upon, the traffic analysis and the capacity analysis I'm looking at has grades of or ratings of D and E currently and projected in 26 to be even worse than that, I guess, assuming that there isn't an improvement to that intersection. You mentioned on a couple of occasions, a $25 million development. It's a lot of money on a particular site that has challenges. And based on what we heard earlier this evening, you've got a similar type development that's going in just north, at the north end of town that doesn't have these type of intersection and traffic challenges. So just maybe some comments or thoughts on that.
On essentially why pick this location? Is that the question?
Well, not necessarily why this location, but why you feel comfortable with the $25 million investment on a site that, as has been mentioned on a number of occasions, is significantly challenged from the standpoint of getting in and out.
I think partly because, we've got a development pipeline of almost $500 million of industrial across the country right now. And a lot of that is serving the same kind of customers that everyone talks about and shops on their phones with every day. And what we're finding is most of those tenants, those companies, in both their truck traffic as well as their employee traffic, are not necessarily moving at the same peak times as, for example, the city of Elmhurst buildings to the south on Riverside. And we actually, as I mentioned, expanded our traffic study to account for that hour of 3 to 4, which is that kind of primary let out time for the city. That really doesn't correlate to sort of where that truck traffic movement happens. So I don't have a concern with this because I'm not building retail. If this was a Walmart or something, there's just no way it could ever possibly work. But as industrial evolves, I really think that the use and the timing of this use is really becoming rather complementary with manufacturing and with commercial, that it sort of gets offset. So I don't have a concern about it, particularly because if I had any amounts of concern, it would be for the trucks. And I think that the way the building's designed, where all the trucks queue off of Monroe, it's a tremendous help. If the building was spun around and everyone was trying to make that same turn off of Riverside, then I would have cause for concern. And I've sat at that intersection for hours, just looking at the traffic, right? And I see people come down Riverside, or see down 83, and then make a U-turn in a truck and go north on the frontage road, which it's they do it, right? Somehow. They're sort of masters in those vehicles sometimes. If I was sort of suggesting to a tenant they should move into this building and sort of have to deal with those kind of issues, I probably wouldn't get many tenants. But the fact that I'm sort of hitting it at a right angle and, again, staying away from most of the car traffic, I think it won't be problematic for anyone.
Thank you. That's helpful. Maybe one follow-up question to that. So you alluded to the traffic in and out of the site maybe being more spread out over the course of a day and doesn't necessarily conflict with some of the peak hours that were mentioned earlier. The existing use of the site in terms of how it's used, is that the traffic patterns now more concentrated during those early morning and late afternoon hours based upon its current use?
My gut would say yes, but maybe it'd be better for Tim to answer with what the traffic study actually told us.
Yeah, we collected data for an elongated period in both the morning and evening periods. And the site's generating in the neighborhood of, I want to say 20 to 30 trips during that peak. So we would be increasing it very, very modestly. That 5-way intersection is challenging, but I suspect that each of us drive through an intersection, if not multiple, during our typical commutes back when we did that, that have levels of service and delays similar or greater to what we're talking about here. Certainly, wanting to make sure that the traffic is well accommodated and having, separate distribution for car and truck, and some of the maneuvering that Neil's been talking about helps to dissipate that a little bit. But while this intersection is problematic and we, support the solution that's being proposed in the short term, this will not be an impactful project. You will not notice when this site opens that you are sitting longer. What you will probably notice is how much nicer the area feels because of the proposed development and the work that's being put into the aesthetic of it. So from a traffic perspective, yes, there are some levels of service that we would like to have better, but I think most of us have commutes that have many intersections like this, where we wait even longer at signals, and it's when we check our phones and then promptly put them away before we start driving again. So this is going to be an intersection that will function adequately, and then obviously much better when a future improvement is made.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay. Commissioner Snyder?
Yes, just out of curiosity, you've mentioned in the documents that you identified 2 spots for a scenic overlook for employees. I was just curious where that is. I really appreciate and like that you guys have incorporated Salt Creek into the design feature. So I'm just curious how you were looking at the outdoor space for employees.
Sure. I think it shows up on the site plan, essentially at the 2 corner office entrances. And I'm sorry, I can't pivot quickly to a site plan and share it with you guys, but it's in the packet. It's on page
site plan is A1.1, Neil.
Yeah, Warner, I'm just looking at the drawings we sent over and I don't see them. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Commissioner Schneider, if you look in the far southeast corner, it's a patio that essentially overlooks the detention pond.
Can you share that what you're looking at, or?
I can try.
So it looks like our staff member is ready to go with that.
Yeah, Emily, are you gonna?
I can, looks like you got it.
You got it? Okay.
Okay, so you can see it right here overlooking the detention pond and then essentially the creek as well. And then I thought we had a second one that actually faced the front pond.
There is a patio called out here about in the middle of the west elevation. I think it may have gotten somewhat obliterated. We had intended, we're showing it as 10 by 25, but it could be made a little larger. This isn't a pond area, it's a natural area. It's a dry pond, so with natural plantings in there. But just another location where there's some availability for outdoor space for the employees.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, I think we will move now in case there is any public testimony. Anyone who wishes to make public testimony or give testimony at this point, please let us know. I'll first ask, Mike, is there anyone in the public comment room who wishes to give testimony?
No, there is not.
Okay. Eileen and Emily, can you please check voicemail and email to see if anyone has requested time for public testimony?
So we did have a couple people send in emails, and I think they are both on the Zoom call. John Ballin from Valmatic and
John, okay.
Donald Anderson as well.
Donald Anderson, is there anyone else? Mr. Anderson, I don't think you were sworn in, were you? You're muted. Eileen, would you close your... Mr. Anderson, were you sworn in? You are muted. Can you please unmute yourself?
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Were you sworn in? I don't believe you were here.
No, I was not.
Okay, we need to swear you in. Is there anyone else who wishes to give public testimony on this case who was not sworn in? Okay. Ask the court reporter, Kiki Andriopoulos, to please swear you in. Could you please raise your right hand and she'll swear you in?
Do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, you have 5 minutes to tell us what's on your mind.
Okay. First of all, thanks for the attention you're giving to the traffic issue. In my conversations with the other business owners, that seemed to be the predominant issue. And I think I feel good that Mike even started the conversation about this project with talking about the traffic issues. And I think you've answered that question about your sharing the concerns that all of us have. I came in because I was a little uncomfortable with the traffic study's conclusion that no additional remedies were needed, and I think everyone here understands that that's the intersection has needed remediation for a long time, and we certainly wouldn't want the decision makers that you are to conclude that this intersection does not need any work. It's needed it for a long time. We've owned our property for 50 years right there, so we've seen a lot of what's gone on in recent history. So I think given that you are aware that and making some tentative plans to rectify it makes me feel really good. But there's always the uncertainty. What if it fails to get funding or engineering or some sort of bump in the road? Is there a plan B that will at least be addressed at some point and help us to fix this thing? And one other thing with Neil's statements today about the property issues that could occur with a new configuration, that doesn't seem like it will be an issue. So there's certain things that you've solved already, and from listening to the previous applicants too, you all seem to take the traffic issue pretty seriously, and I think a lot of business owners are grateful for that. And it's a tough thing. I don't know what the communication with IDOT is, and if there's any other remedies that could be suggested if this plan doesn't materialize, if there's other plans that could be considered and put into place without waiting another 20 some years for it to happen. So, but No, I learned a lot by sitting in on this. This is the first meeting I ever sat in on, and I think you all take your jobs pretty seriously, and I think I'm happy to feel that you do have our interests under consideration too, as with Dermody. I was happy to hear that that was not going to be ignored either. So I think that's all I have, unless there was a plan B or plan C that bears discussion at this point, but it's probably a little premature for that. But
great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. I think that Assistant City Manager Mike Kopp said, I think they have been aware of this, and that if this plan is approved, this PUD is approved, there will be some looking at what are some temporary solutions that can be implied. Sometimes as development moves in, that really spurs solutions. So that would be, yeah, I think nobody thinks that's a great intersection. It's terrible. So I think we all see it. So, but thank you for coming in. We'll move towards that. So, Mr. Ballin, you wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for recognizing me, Chair Rose. I'm John Ballin. I'm the president of Valmatic Valve. We are the company that's just south of the development. We have about 150 employees, about 100 cars that go right up Riverside every day. And I've worked there for 26 years, and I've driven through that intersection for 26 years, and I've seen it all. And I want to come before you tonight to let you know it's not just serious, it's dangerous. Because when I leave Riverside Drive, I go to Route 83 intersection, I get in the left turn lane, and I'll sit there and wait for the light. And after I've had to wait in line to get to that light, to wait to turn left, then a truck will want to turn right off of Route 83 onto Monroe. And the 2 or 3 people in that left turn lane, we literally have to back up one after another to make room for that truck to get off of Route 83. And this happens to me probably twice a week. So although Mr. Driscoll wisely said, well, we'll let the trucks come in and out of Monroe, they still have to make that darn right turn off of Route 83 when they're going north onto Monroe and bust through that left turn lane there. So the immediate solution would be to widen that intersection so that they have a little more room to make that right turn. It'd be something they should look at. And I was very pleased at Mr. Driscoll's presentation. The building is very attractive. It would be a great enhancement to the area. There are a lot of trucks there now, and we faced this problem for quite some time. And I want to thank him for adding to his project the land set aside for this realignment. And I urge the city to put any kind of pressure they can on IDOT to make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your comments. Anyone else from the public wish to give testimony at this point? Okay. Seeing none, I will close this for public testimony, and I want to thank both Mr. Anderson and Mr. Ballin for sitting through this and having your voice heard, because that's really important for us. So I'm going to come back to the commission, or any other further questions, or does anyone have any? Okay. I would like to close the public hearing at this point, and ask if there is anyone who is opposed to deliberation on this project tonight. Again, you can be opposed for any reason. You want more information, you want more time, but it has been our default position that if possible, we would like to deliberate on the same evening. So let me ask if any of the commissioners has any desire to hold off deliberation. Okay. Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion and a second to approve the plan unit development as proposed with no site development allowances being given. So can I have a motion to approve and a second? Commissioner Uditsky moves. Can we have a second to that motion? Commissioner Snyder. All right, Commissioner Uditsky.
Well, I think Mr. Ballin summed it up pretty well there a couple of minutes ago when he said that, this development will be a much needed improvement, to that particular area and certainly the site. And I applaud Mr. Driscoll for the applicant's presentation. I think they did a really good job and addressed a number of issues. Clearly, we appreciate as well, their willingness to work with the city. It sounds like, and it sounds like all of us have been by that intersection, and it's much needed, improvements. And it's great that they're willing to work with, with the city on that, and hopefully that can get accomplished. But I think in general, with respect to the standards, and I can go through each one if you prefer, but I think generally they've met the standards both for the PUD and the conditional use. If we want to go through each one in particular, we can, but I think in the application, they did a pretty good job of addressing each one. Certainly with respect to the conditional use standards, probably some of the applicable standards. Number two, whether or not the conditional use will be injurious to the use and enjoyment of their property. I think, as I just indicated, and perhaps as I think Commissioner Snyder was asking, there may be some, temporary during construction inconvenience, but I think long-term, including any improvements that can be made to the intersection, that actually the improvements will enhance, the area. Establishment of the conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property. If anything, I think, it's a big upgrade and could in fact attract development to the area. Ingress and egress, number 5, in terms of traffic congestion. I think, as we talked about, they did a fine job in terms of addressing that. I understand normally if that Monroe Street were a thoroughfare, I would have more concern, but I think because it's a dead end and there's really only 2 businesses across the street, and I understand, as he was indicating, that in theory would be, it would be a dedicated street, but normally I would have concern with so many trucks, kind of direct access to the street. But I think here, that's mitigated given the circumstances. With respect to the PUD issues or conditions, whether or not, the plan development will conform with the general planning policies of the city. I think this follows with the city plan, and it's certainly the use or intended use is consistent with the plan. Public welfare, I think we've addressed. Let's see, public facilities, archaeological, historical, cultural impact are probably not relevant, in my opinion. Again, so much of this goes to parking and traffic. Number 6, and I think they've done a fair job of preserving the combined site with the creek going through, and sort of the pedestrian and vehicular, bridges over the site. That was one of the things that I had concerns about when I first looked at the plans was, okay, what's going to happen with that creek? But I think they did a good job of addressing that. adequate buffering. Certainly the detention areas, are important, and we'll see if the city does that, whole improvement to the intersection, kind of how that, that's addressed. I did have some concern in reviewing the plan, just in terms of the additional trailer parking and whether or not maybe there could be like a berm or landscaping there that would block it. But again, this is a very industrial area, and so I'm not incredibly concerned. That's along Riverside Drive there. If it were a much more visible, area, or there were residential around there, something, I would be concerned or more concerned with that. All in all, I think it's a good plan. I think that it's a significant improvement to the area, certainly to the property, could attract additional, development. Clearly, there are some specifics to work out, and hopefully, they can work with the city to improve that intersection and the traffic, given how close the site is to that. But overall, I'm in favor of the proposal.
Thank you. Commissioner Snyder?
Thank you, Chair Rose. Yes, I agree with everything that Commissioner Ujitsky has stated and with his assessment of the project. And in particular, I'm really concerned and have great concern over that intersection. And so I really see that this project will be the impetus for moving the intersection improvement forward. And I think that's, all of the businesses will benefit from that. The sooner the better, I think that happens. So I think this is it's a tremendous project for this particular location. I really appreciate that Dermody is looking at Salt Creek as a feature, and it's really a unique design layout challenge, and I just think it's a great benefit. And as one of the other business owners stated, it'll be an aesthetic improvement to the area as well. So I commend you on this project, and I look forward to seeing it move forward.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other commissioner? Commissioner Hoffman and then Commissioner Pittman.
Thanks, Chair Rose. Just a quick comment. I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Uditsky and Commissioner Snyder, and applaud Dermody on what looks to be a huge improvement to the area in regards to the development. I agree that this could spur improvements to that intersection, and would love to see the plan B or C that the business owner suggested in regards to the widening of that intersection to provide more room for that left-hand turn to go, what would that be, southbound on Route 83. If that could be investigated, I think that would be a big improvement in the short term.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Pittman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I just wanted to say that I support this application. Most importantly, I think because of the applicant's willingness to work with the city and do whatever it takes to make sure that intersection does get reworked. I think that's critical. I think not only does the development add to this area and really, showcases what that section of town could be, I do think that their willingness to work with the city and do whatever it takes to improve that intersection is critical, because we could have somebody who comes in and isn't. So I do support it. I also think, they haven't asked for any development allowances. That's another plus. And I do think that it will be a great addition to the city.
Great. I think their willingness to work with the city is certainly seen in their stated intention and designing the layout of the project so that they can, in fact, deed a corner of that property so that the intersection can be reconfigured. That it's not just talk, that they have designed their projects so that can occur. Because if that did not happen, then nice talk, but it would just make it more complicated. So I see that as a show of good faith for them as well. So any other comments by commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask Eileen to please call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. The recommendation to the Development Planning and Zoning Committee will be positive. Will this go to the DPZ on Monday as well?
I believe so. I'll confirm it with the applicant tomorrow. If I could just take a moment to ask our court reporter, Kiki, if we could have both sets of transcripts from tonight expedited so that we have them by Monday. And we can talk tomorrow if we need to about that, but I just want to mention that.
I think these two cases really underlie the argument that's been made that, and I've heard actually that the rate of vacancy for these types of facilities is even less than 4%. It's closer to 1% in Elmhurst right now, that the demand is very, very strong for this. And this just adds really to the economic mosaic of this community and what makes it a great community and what makes it a financially secure community are these kinds of projects. So I appreciate the attention both applicants have given to the concern of residents and the commissioners about traffic, congestion, that's always close to the top for anyone in this community. So we really appreciate that, and it shows a real partnership. So I think these are great projects, so I'm really happy to see that. I just want to advise you, we are moving on to other business, that next week we are going to have it's next Tuesday, is that correct? It is the 23rd of February. It's not a regularly scheduled meeting, but this is a training that we've scheduled around zoning and planning commission issues. So I'm very excited about that because we have a number of new commissioners, but we've also advised the people who are doing this that this is not an inexperienced group. This is a group that is experienced, and so we're not starting off with just the basics. So a lot of you have been on the commission for a number of months. So, but I think this is really, I've attended several of these trainings, and the truth is I always learn something from them. And I just had an issue that came up over the week that I actually want to pass by the trainers and do some discussion on around this ex parte communication and the definition of that, which is really important for us. So that training will take place at 7 o'clock. Is that correct, Eileen?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll be 7 o'clock. So please advise Eileen if you will not be here, but we will go ahead and set that up for that. Eileen, do you have any other business for us this evening?
Just a comment on the upcoming agenda items. Our first meeting in March, we will have another industrial warehouse plan development on Lamont Road. And we will also have a request from the owner of Yorkie's restaurant on North York for a conditional use to add a drive-through to Yorkie's and a conditional use to redevelop the car wash that is south of Yorkie's. And then there are 2 subdivisions on that agenda as well. And then our second meeting in March will be the continued public hearing for Roberto's. And after March, I think we are finally going to be caught up with our kind of backlog of cases that we had from last year and just our busy schedule that we had. So thank you again for accommodating us with the extra meetings. I think we may be past that now. So
I would like to thank everyone for that as well, because I know it's unusual for us to go, week after week after week. But, I think what we're seeing is there's a lot of activity going on in Elmhurst right now. Lots and lots of activity. That's good news for everyone. So, but the hope is that starting in April, we will return to just a every other week schedule. As far as I know, we'll be continuing to meet in a virtual format. We'll find out, if and when that is alleviated, and I suspect it will not be until the fall. That would be my guess. So that we'll just continue in this format for that amount of time, it's been challenging. I miss seeing all of you face to face, but I really appreciate all of you, your effort to really participate in this. I teach online, and you guys are much better than my students, who I'm never really sure if they are listening or if they are on Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever they are doing. So, but I appreciate, so I thank everybody for that as well. So, and if there's no other business, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Pittman. All right, you'll have to call the roll. Eileen will call the roll.
Thank you. And the motion was Commissioner Uditsky, correct? Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes.